Cool, cool. So most people have watched the video. If you haven't watched it, we're going to go back over it in detail and kind of work through it. So we should get more review here, but you might want to watch it after the GP if you think that would be good for you. First thing I wanted to do, and I'll just make this anonymous, and you can comment in the poll. If you've got any questions about the exercises you were working on, we're not going to get into real detail about any particular exercises, but if anything in the syntax is confusing you, anything Python specific, anything that we can quickly answer here, if you've got a complicated problem with a particular exercise or particular unit that we were working on yesterday, you can get with your PM, get with me. If I'm your PM, go to the help channel. We can chat about it after GP, but I'm going to go ahead and post this. Any questions about yesterday? Anything weird about Python that you just don't quite understand, or you don't see what was going on with the formatting, any of the methods? This is just like JavaScript, and I'm sure you've all heard this a million times, but most of this you can Google it. There's the help that's within built into the shell where you can just say help and then the curly braces, and it gives you all the options, or that'll give you all the options of the different subjects. Let's say you needed help on strings. You could put help open, it's not curly braces, open parens, and then string, and I'll just show you actually. So if I was in this, I can say Python 3, go into the shell, I can say help like this. It gives you a list of all the modules. You can type in here modules. It'll show you everything. Let's say you wanted to know about, I don't know, like I was saying earlier, strings. You can say help. I think you have to put it, I don't think you can do this. So you have to do help string with the parens. What the heck is it doing? There, you just type string once you're actually in the help. Or then Q to escape. If you're just in the shell after you've done Python 3, you can say help. This is where I was thinking, specifically like that. And it'll give you what you're looking for. So you've got the built-in help. You've got the online documentation where you can just go in, just like we always do. Say we wanted to know about min. You could just type Python min max. It'll probably pull up. I've been there before. Yeah, there's the documentation right here. You can see all the built-in stuff, hyperlinks to it when you go to max. So you've got that as well. And of course, a lot of times just something comes up quick that you can read. So a lot of different resources. One person said, yes, there's a question. Type the question in the comments. You can add a comment. Just click add comment and you can type the question. Or you can open your mic and ask it. It doesn't matter to me. As long as while we're in here, I'll say it ahead of time if it's okay, but a lot of times I'll allow, as long as we're not talking over each other, I'll let people open their mics. You know, don't cut somebody off or cut me off, but you know, a lot of with a small group, it's normally pretty easy to let people use their mics, and sometimes a lot more efficient. Just waiting a minute to see if somebody was going to type that question, but we can go back to it. Did Sean cover Python Tutor the other day? Somebody type yes or no. No. Okay. PythonTutor.com. Real simple. So Python Tutor is really cool. We'll use it on and off a lot during the GPs. The instructors will use it during Q&As. You can use it if you want. Sometimes it is limited. There's some modules that you can't use within it. I'm trying to think what didn't work. It doesn't, just know it has its limitations, but for the basics, it's really cool. So say it helps you visualize step by step, just like some of the extensions and tools we used in JavaScript. So say you wanted to define numbers equals, and we'll make a list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we could just say for num in numbers, print num, visualize execution, and it literally will crawl through, and you can just click forward and it will show you what's happening both inside of the list that we've got. You can just keep going through it, and it also has the print output here. Now, mind you, when the arrow is here, it's actually when you click the next time that it's going to come, and it literally will just show you what's going on both under the hood under the hood and obrigado. Fecha a porta, por favor. Sorry, it's getting some coffee. And it lets you just visualize what's going on. And for something like this, obviously, it's probably not necessary, but when you start dealing with more complex functions and operations, it's really nice to be able to step through things. Sometimes it can help you with debugging. It will catch your errors if you put, let's say I tried to edit this code, and let's say I did something like that and took away the, first thing it's going to do is throw an error and tell me where my error is, because once I fix it, you can say visualize execution. And once again, we've got workable code. So that's something cool we're going to use a lot of, and I would encourage you to make use of it if you think it would help. It's just pythontutor.com, and then you can just go right here. It's not even let me do it. And then once you're in pythontutor.com, you just click here, and you can also, you can use it for C, which we'll be doing later. I've never looked at any of the other ones, but it does have ones for C and C++ that I've used before, and they do the same thing. So it's a pretty nice little adjunct. It's not the focus of what we're doing today, but I certainly wanted to point that out. I just have a few exercises that I didn't finish. I'll ask my PM later in the afternoon. Cool. So doesn't look like anyone has any other questions. Something I wanted to go over real quick with Python functions. And I was just showing it, but there's a few things with Python that I just want to stress again. In a function, remember that your spacing and your indentation are key in Python. So without getting into any kind of a complex function, again, if I did what I had done earlier and said numbers equals 32, whatever, and then I said for num in numbers, print num, and tried to run this, it's going to throw an error because it's not indented properly. Indent it, it runs. But instead of using braces like JavaScript does and being able to play with the indentation like JavaScript does, where it doesn't really matter because the white space doesn't matter, your white space does matter, your spacing and your indentation does absolutely matter in Python 100% of the time. It's one of the nice things about Python, but it's also one of the pains pain in the rears about Python, that one little space literally can throw off the whole program. And of course, as you know, sometimes when you're debugging, even though you might have a linter or something pointing to where it is, where the error is, sometimes it doesn't point to the specific location where the problem is. So just be cognizant that your spacing does matter and your indentation does matter. And I know you're already aware of that, but it's just something that I wanted to reiterate with everyone. Who can tell me what's the difference between passing an argument by reference and passing it by value? It doesn't have to be a complex answer. Difference in passing something by reference and passing something by value. Somebody type something. I'm just going to sit here until somebody types. It's something I'm going to do a lot when I ask a question. I'm looking for an answer. Even if you're not sure, put something and I will sit until somebody says something. Passing by reference versus passing by argument. Anybody know? Anybody have any clue? Anybody want to Google it? Come on. Ah, cool. Somebody's typing. Yep, that is absolutely correct. One change the original value and the other doesn't? Correct. When you pass by value, I'm going to do a code example here, but when you pass by value, you're simply putting a value in and it doesn't change the original value. When you pass by reference, you are changing the value. So I can do it right here in Python Tutor. So if I wanted to say, we wanted to say have a function that says multiply by 2. We'll call it mult2 of x. Remember your colon. That's another thing in Python. Always remember. I forget them at times. If you ever see me, whatever I'm in my editor and here and I'm forgetting something, feel free to call me out and let me know that I'm missing something, because it's a heck of a lot easier to fix it now than to have to go try to debug it later. But your semicolon, and here we could put a return x times 2. And then we can also do a doubling. That is passing by value. When you pass the value into here, it's simply taking in a value. So we'll invoke that here in a second, but we'll also do call it mult2 list, and it will take in a list. This is going to become a lot more relevant and a lot more apparent in C when we start passing things by value, because of the nature and the both simplicity and the simplicity but the complexity of C. There will be a lot of passing by value, so, or by reference, excuse me. So if you don't totally get your head wrapped around this right now, it's okay. But and here we don't need a return. But all we're doing here is we're taking a list. We are iterating over the list using, we could use a couple different syntaxes, but saying for I in range, length of list, which simply will iterate over the whole list. And then we are just saying L and I, we're accessing that specific element based on the index, and we're multiplying it by 2. And simply this syntax is the same as the plus equals or whatnot in JavaScript, where we are, because we pass this by reference, this is changing this value. So if we wanted to demonstrate that, we could say y equals molt2 and put in a 12, and then have the print y. Should let me execute it. And it's outputting 24. On the contrary, if I wanted to say L equals, say 3, 7, 13, and then we invoke molt2 list. L, so we're passing in L. We've defined the list here. Once again, a list is the same as an array in JavaScript. In Python, we call them a list, but it's the same as an array in JavaScript. So we're simply defining our list. What's something, just another question that comes up, what is something different about variables in Python versus variables in JavaScript? We don't have to deal with typing where you have to declare what type it's going to be, but what's something that's different? Look at line 8. What is different about variables in JavaScript versus Python? What is different about variables in Python versus JavaScript?
It's strongly typed.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you say it again?
I think the Python is strongly typed. I don't know the Java, but
no. Well, like C is strongly typed. All the difference, meaning you have to declare the type. But in JavaScript, remember, you have your var or let or const. You don't have to do that in Python. That's all I was getting at. Strongly typed, meaning you have to declare the type like in C, with it's an int, if it's a float, and you can change that later in a way, and you can cast, but just like JavaScript, Python handles, under the hood, handles the typing for you, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I personally prefer strongly typed languages now that I've dealt with C a lot. I use TypeScript and JavaScript whenever I can. That started with using Angular in my startup, and I've never kind of gone back from it. I certainly don't have to use it, but I like it, and I like that. But that's a story for a different day. But yeah, that's the only difference, is you don't have to say initially, you don't have to say let L equal this before you could just say L equals this, and then you could go in here if you wanted to do something like L dot append, I don't know, 1 or whatnot. So all we're doing here is we're defining L, the list, and we're just having it 3, 7, 13. And then we're just saying we're invoking this function molt2 of the list. So this is passing in by reference. This is not passing in by value. We're passing in a reference. Like I said, again, we'll get more into that in C when we're passing by reference, when we're actually we're referencing an actual point in physical memory. And in doing that and passing by reference, we're actually going to, as remember talking about in JavaScript, whether we mutated or didn't mutate an array when we had all of our different methods that we had available to us, and some mutated, some did not mutate. Passing by reference does mutate, I guess, is another way of wording this. So if we did this, then we could say mult2 list L, and then we could just go and print the list. So we could say for I and L, print I, and all we're doing is iterating over this new list, and we're going to see what we get. So if we visualize the execution, and I'm just going to jump to the end, we have 6, 14, and 26. We originally had 3 times 2 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 7 times 2 is 14, 13 times 2 is 26. So there's no way to make a variable that can't be reassigned like const in JavaScript. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. At the top of my head, yeah, I don't think you can. I didn't think you can. Kind of old. It's not common to see it. I cannot remember coming across a constant, something barely. It looks like there might be some kind of a way to do it. You can go Google that to look for it, but there's no common way. Now there is something called a tuple in it's a type in Python, and it is ordered. It's kind of like a list, but it's ordered. You would do it like this. So a tuple is immutable. So you could say L equals, and instead of like using the brackets, use a parens 2, 3, 6. This is ordered and immutable, so you cannot change this. That is immutable, tuple, and it can be as many or as few items as you want. I think.
So couldn't we multiply or divide any tuple?
You could iterate over the tuple and create a new tuple or new list from it, but you cannot mutate the tuple itself. Tuple, tuple, I have a real bad habit. I'm originally from Texas. I have a bad habit of mispronouncing things. So I think it's tuple actually, but I'm not sure. Tuple, tuple, whatever. You cannot change it. You can also, there's also sets, we'll go over those later, that you cannot have duplicates within a set. So you couldn't have something like, 1, 1, or 1, 1, 2, and there's specific uses for that. But as far as like having something in JavaScript like const L equals 13, there's nothing just readily available or readily used in Python that is equivalent. It sounds like I said, there's a backwards way to do it, and I know that the tuples are immutable, but no, you're not declaring const, var, let, anything like that. So. And I'm going to go back to this. And I printed the code and just showed you. So say we had gone up here and edited the code, and we just never did this, and we visualize the execution. We can just hit last, and we're going to get 3, 7, and 13. Anybody have any questions over this? If you have questions, type them. I don't want to make a survey each time, so I can make it anonymous. There's no shame in asking a question or not knowing something. I just didn't know the answer to the question that Matt asked. So sometimes I'll make things anonymous if it's asking about, did you watch the video or whatever? Because of course we're supposed to have watched them. And sometimes I'll make them anonymous for the fun of it, but you need to get used to speaking up or typing, and I kind of take silence as to mean that there's no questions. So basically the whole point of this was just to go over passing by reference versus passing by value. And like Matt originally said, one changes the original value, the other doesn't. So I guess the only thing that I'll go a little bit further into right here is that when you're passing this in by value, there's actually a piece in memory when you pass in 3. That 3 holds a place in memory. But when you return x times 2, you're creating a new place in memory with that x times 2 where it returns 6. You're not changing that spot in the physical memory on your computer of that 3 that was originally there. When you put this list in here, and lists by nature are passed by reference the way we have this set up, you are changing those pieces in memory that hold 3, 7, and 13 as we saw here. We're mutating it. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. Remember back to your JavaScript, and a lot of times we didn't want to mutate. In fact, a lot of times it was like in Redux, you were never to mutate by ideals and by you can, but you're not supposed to. Speaking of, real quick, I'm going to do something. And know that when we're in here, don't even hide the fact I snapshot the attendance at some point, who's in here, who's not. So if you're not planning on paying attention off the record, I would suggest at least logging in, because if you don't, if I'm your PM, I'm going to count you absent. And I'm posting 4 people in here, have Brian as a PM, and I'm turning in the attendance to him, and he'll do with it as he sees fit. So just know that. I want to be real transparent about that. Okay, so for Polya, it's most of the people, I'm going to drop a link here. I don't think this link was in any of your material. This is a nice summation of Polya in about 3 or 4 pages, I think. But Polya's problem-solving techniques, a little bit of background on it, was what, I have to look again, 1945, George Polya published the book, How to Solve It. It was based, I believe Polya was a mathematics. I don't remember if he was a teacher in a high school or an instructor, a professor in college, but he wrote a manual on problem solving that can be applied to many, many different things in life. It was specifically aimed at mathematics, and apropos, it is very relevant to computer science and to programming. He breaks down solving a problem into 4 different pieces. Obviously, I've given you the link in there in front of you, but somebody tell me, what are the 4 steps in Polya? Somebody type or get on the mic and tell me what the 4 steps, just the basics. You don't have to describe each step, but in a few words, what are the 4 steps? Understand the problem. Yep, and we're going to kind of talk about each of these. We don't have a whole lot of coding today. We're going to go through something that I'm not even going to encourage. I'm going to require group participation to get through it. But we're going to talk this out, and know that this is something that's going to be stressed through the entire computer science curriculum. So you're going to hear me talk about it a lot of times. You're going to hear the instructors talk about it. It's hopefully something that, you might not, sit there and utilize step by step by step each time, but it's a good habit to get into. I think the way Lambda started using this as a student actually pointed it out. They're like, hey, this is really good. But we all know, and we talk about a lot, that most of programming is knowing how to solve problems, and knowing how to solve problems involves a systematic approach to some extent. And Polya gives us a very systematic, very clear and concise approach to solving problems. Understand the problem by asking questions, correct. Devise a plan, correct. Carry out the plan, revise and optimize. And I love this, as I think I might have said the other day, I'm an MMA fighter. My favorite MMA fighter of all time, Georges St. Pierre, had a quote one time about life, and he said, pick a goal, something to the effect of pick a goal, make a reasonable plan to reach that goal, execute, and repeat. And it's almost this to a T. And if any of y'all are aware of who I'm talking about, he's considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. So, I mean, he kind of took the same thing in his own way and applied it to his life and rose to the very top of his profession. But yeah, so the first step is understand the problem. Understanding the problem, and I'm kind of going to go off what's here, but I'm just going to kind of talk because I've been through this a lot before. If you don't understand the problem, especially here in computer science, I don't know how much it can be stressed that if you don't understand the problem, you're going to have trouble coming up with a solution. So the first thing you want to do is understand the problem. And a real simple way, and it's actually listed here, it's a number 3 bullet point here, but can you say it in your own words? There's a quote here at Lambda that if you can't explain something to someone simply, I think it's on the Slack when you spin up the Slack, if you can't explain something to someone simply, you don't really understand it. And if you can't put a problem into your own words, and this is going to apply through here, we'll stress this in graphs, which is probably the most difficult module in all of Lambda and one of the more difficult aspects of basic computer science, but put it in your own words. If you can't put it in your own words, you need to go back and understand it more. And you know, what are the problems? What are the questions that you need to ask once you've been presented a problem? So how this would have a real life application. Say an employer comes to you and they say, you know, hey Matt, I got this problem I need you to solve. I need you to write a program for this. And they give you some instructions or you get written instructions. You most certainly may have some questions, and we're going to work through this here in a minute. You're going to have some questions about the problem that's been presented. So here's your chance to ask the questions to yourself and do further research, to ask the questions to the person presenting it to you, to ask questions for your team. But absolutely. And some people may find it helpful to sketch things out at this point, write down their thoughts, but I don't want to dwell too long on each step, but definitely the first part of it is understand the problem, most certainly. And the second principle, devise a plan. And there's a lot of ways to do this. In computer science and coding, what would be a way of devising a plan? Somebody give me an idea of how they might devise a plan. It's a one-word answer that starts with a P. Pseudocode. Thank you, Matt. Pseudocoding. So whether you're scratching it out on a piece of paper, whether you go through and start making, a real popular way is to start making comments, using comments in whatever language you're using, and just start comment out your plan and just put it in plain English or whatever language you want to put it in. But you're not actually coding at this point. You're just kind of pseudocoding, and you're devising. It says here, Polya mentions there are many reasonable ways to solve a problem, and a lot of them are listed here. I'm not going to go through each of them. Some of them are relevant, some of them are not. But in any case, you need to come up with a plan, and we'll talk about it more later. But we talk about, you know, the first plan. You don't have to implement a perfect solution initially. Remember, especially if you're whiteboarding or if you've got a time limit with work, we always talk about MVP. Come up with something that works, even if it's ugly, even if it's not dry. Do not repeat yourself, that we've been through before. But it doesn't have to be perfect, but get something that works. Get something that works. So devise a plan, you know, a first pass solution that's going to give you an answer, even if it's wordy, even if it's long. One thing I would stress here is don't get a lot of spaghetti code going. Just because I say ugly doesn't mean start writing in a bunch of spaghetti code that's unclear, unorganized, but it doesn't have to be the most efficient solution in terms of things that we'll cover in the future, like time complexity and space complexity or whatnot. Come up with a solution. Then the third part, carry out the plan. What would carrying out the plan be here? What would carrying out the plan be? Someone type. How would you carry out the plan? You understand the problem, you get your pseudocode. Now, how are we going to carry that up? How are we going to carry out that plan?
You actually write the code, implement the functions.
Yep, that's exactly it. You write the code. So a lot of times, like I said, a popular thing to do is pseudocode, leave spaces between your pseudocode and start writing in between the pseudocode. You can always go in and delete it out later on, or change it into comments or whatever. Change it into appropriate comments, documentation style comments for your code. But yeah, you're just going to carry it out. In our case, you are simply writing the code. And then the final step, revise and optimize. What would this mean when we're coding? Revise and optimize. We've written the code, we're ready to execute the code. We execute the code, we compile it, we run it in the browser, whatever language we're dealing with, however we're dealing with it. Then what? What are we going to be doing here when we revise and optimize?
Think about ways to make the code better or more efficient.
Exactly. Make sure that it's dry. Do not repeat yourself. Assuming that y'all covered that very early in JavaScript, correct? Somebody say yes or no. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we don't need to go over that, but make sure your code's dry. Try to optimize the efficiency. That like something we'll cover more in detail later. But the time and the space complexity. Right now, you can just think of it when you execute your code. Your code takes 2 minutes to run. What can we go back through to make this code more efficient so it's not taking up so much dang time? But another thing here is simply looking for bugs. We may have a simple piece of code. Obviously, you're probably going to want to try to test out your code, whether you're writing tests beforehand, afterwards, whether you're running it in the browser with something like JavaScript, whether you're testing out modules of your code. But yeah, there's definitely going to be debugging hit this is an integral part of this step. So you're debugging, seeing if we can make it dry, seeing if we can make it more efficient with the memory, the space complexity, see if we can make it more efficient in reducing the number of operations that we perform, the time complexity. Like I said, don't worry too much about those now. That's something we'll cover later. But yeah, and summed it up perfect right there. Instead, just making the code more efficient, making it cleaner, making it easier to read. We had our first pass solution that might have been a little ugly. This is a second pass, so we're going to make it better. And that's the basics of Polya and how it applies. I would encourage everybody to read over this on their own time and to try, at least to some degree, to always implement this type of thing. I'll admit something about myself. I self-taught for 6 months before Lambda, and even when I was at Lambda, we talked about problem solving, but we didn't have a specific system that we really talked about, like Polya's. But I kind of cowboyed a lot of stuff and I got away with a lot of it, but in terms of not coming up with a plan and just starting to write code. And in general, it worked for me, but it would have been better from day one to get in the habit of making sure I understood the problem, coming up with a plan, and then starting the code. And obviously doing, as we said in the end, evaluating and reiterating for a more efficient solution, prettier code, better code. But it's going to come up a lot. And anybody have any questions in general about Polya? I think this is pretty straightforward. It's about 53 minutes after the hour. I'm going to give everybody a 5-minute break. So step away, grab some coffee, run to the bathroom, stretch, do whatever you want to do. I'll just say at the hour. So at y'all's time, 10 o'clock, or Lambda time, 10 o'clock, we'll be back. That gives you 6 minutes, and we will go over a problem, work a problem together, come up with a Pythonic solution, and we will utilize and talk through Polya while we do that. So kill this. So everybody take 5. Give about 1 more minute for everybody to come back and we will get started. I'm going to go ahead and get started again. All right, so I posted something in the channel. It's a problem. Return the centered average of an array of ints, a list in Python. So you're going to get a list and return a centered average. We will say that the center average is the mean average of the values, all the values added together divided by the number of values, except ignoring the largest and smallest values in the array. Everybody read that, think about it for a couple seconds. What are some questions that may come up if this was all the information you had? Don't think about even how we're going to implement it, but what are some questions we may have? Edge cases or just questions in general? Step one, is understand the problem. There's a couple questions here definitely that come up. We're going to ignore the largest and smallest value and get the centered average. What are some potential questions or issues or possible unknowns or edge cases or different ways that this could be solved depending on what the person asking was? What do we mean by centered? I think they're saying centered simply because if you had this does not require that the list be sorted, but if the list was sorted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we're taking the center of it in terms of 2 through 9, and we're ignoring 1 and 10. So you're taking everything that's in the center and leaving the outermost pieces out. I think for this, we don't have to, how we sort the array, if you're meaning how we're going to find the min and the max, yeah. What types of values are in the list? Ints, floats, yeah. We're going to be dealing with, we're going to do ints here. I'll just go ahead and give you that. We're going to do ints, but a good question. Another question that could come out of that, if we're doing floats, are we going to return an integer value? If we're doing ints, are we going to return an int or a float? What's something else in here? We said that we're going to ignore the largest and smallest values. What could be something that could pop up once we've determined these values and we're excluding them? What about duplicates? If we have duplicate values, are we going to ignore all of them or some of them? That would be a question that could come up. In this case, we're only going to ignore one. So if we have 5 elements that are 1, we're only going to ignore 1 once. So we're going to take a list, just for example, I'll just type in let me make this a little bit bigger. Is this good enough for everybody to be able to see me typing? Is it big enough? Yes, no? If it's too small. What's that?
That's fine for me.
It's good? If it's too small for anybody, speak up. If not, I'll just go with this. So,
do we need to find the median? What does average mean? Centered average. Just do we need to find the number in the center, or?
So, for example, the centered average here, I do have this sorted. This does not require that it be sorted. The center average is simply the sum of this divided by how many elements. So here we've got 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. What we want to do is write a program. Since this is in order, we can do it like this. We'll take 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7, which is what, 13, 18, 22, 25. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. 25 divided by 5, the output would be 5 here. The centered average would be 5. Say we made 2 elements that were 6. So we would have 26 divided by 5. And we would still output 5 because we are going to round. We'll say in this case, we're going to floor everything. Everybody remember what flooring is. No matter whether it's 3.1 or 3.9999, the output is 3. And remember in Python, I'm going to go into the shell for this and just reiterate this for
Can a list hold different types like ints, floats, strings, or should the list have just one type?
Can you repeat your question?
Can a list hold different types or?
In Python?
Yeah, like.
Yes. So you mean, could I have like 1, 3, 4, 6, hello, 7, 9?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, you can. Now you'll see, what's that?
What about, could we concatenate or multiply float with integer?
Concatenate or multiply a float with an integer. Are you meaning just simply in Python?
Yeah.
Are you
like 2.5 multiply 3 or 2.5 plus 3?
In the specific question that we're doing, or in the specific problem that we're solving for, we're only going to deal with integers. In Python, of course, you can, I'm just using the shell to, now something I was going to point out in Python, say you have 25, you say 25 divided by 5 is 5.0. But you can also do, if you said 26 divided by 5, you get 5.2. But if you say 26, 2 forward slashes divided by 5, it gives you 5. Or if you said 25 divided by 5, you also do not get a float for an answer. So this is the double forward slash in Python is for division, where it will, no matter what it is, even if it's going to be, you could say 3.999 divided by 1. Well, that's fine that it did that. Divided by 1, and it will give you 3.0. And the reason it gives you 3.0 is because you originally had a float here. It doesn't do that in this case because you gave it all integers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. Got it.
Yeah, no problem. And there's a lot of little nuances to Python that are different about JavaScript. I know Sean covered that yesterday, and there were some links that we gave that compared them side by side. There's a lot of, Python is fairly powerful with math, and there's a lot available in it. There's certainly a lot I don't know about it. But in this case, all we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking these middle numbers, going to be summing them, dividing by the number of elements that we have, and getting that centered average. We're just taking an average. Okay, we got 5 people in a room, get their average age. That's all we're asking for. And we're going to use floor division in this case so that we have an integer answer. So everybody clear on the problem and how we're going to go about doing it. And you kind of see in the step 1, there's a lot of things that can come up, a lot of questions that can come up to make whatever we're doing clear. When you're in this shell, and I actually forgot for just a second, when you're in the Python shell, like I was showing earlier, you can invoke that shell just saying Python 3, and it brings you into the shell. And if you want to exit the shell, you just hit exit and your empty parens, and it gets you back out to your regular CLI. Okay, so let's write some Python. I'm going to use Python tutor, I think, for this today, but we certainly can write it elsewise for here. All right, so we are going to make a list. Remember, a list is the same thing as an array in JavaScript, and we'll say 1, 41, 34. Note this is not in order, 29, 50, and 50. How might we go about, don't even think about Python or whatever, but remember, we've decided that we're going to get the average here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements. We're going to be summing 4 of them, dividing by 4. We've got to get rid of the largest and the smallest. I'm going to make so we do not have order. We have some duplicates. Just kind of thinking in pseudocode, you don't have to think about it in Python. We'll deal with that in just a second. How would you maybe, obviously, we got to determine the minimum and the maximum value. How might we go about doing this? We definitely need to sort them.
Yeah, I would sort them, then remove the first and the last one.
So you're saying sort them and then remove the first element and the last element?
Yeah, and then use the rest in a for loop and then calculate everything.
If you didn't want to use a sort, this is just thinking here, I'm just trying to get people to think. If you didn't want to sort it, what else could you do? Because remember, sorting can get pretty intensive in time and memory. If we had a really long list, a sort can be real problematic. What's something else we could do that would just be a one pass, that would just, because a lot of sorting algorithms, and once again, we'll cover this more, the time complexity, the number of operations that it takes gets very complex. And it can take a long time. If we didn't want to sort it, what else could we just do that might involve iteration, just a single pass iteration? There's still going to be a few operations in it, but what could we do? What could we do? Sorting is definitely a good answer. We could sort it, get the first and the last, and then get the average of the rest. But what else could we maybe do?
We could look through to find the minimum and maximum, but I think it wouldn't take less time than sorting.
Well, it depends on what type of a sort you use. You could create something for the min. You could say numbers, and then you could create a variable for min and max, and set them both equal to nothing at first, and then you would just, as you iterate through, you're going to be storing the min and the max, and of course, each time that you do that, you're going to have to compare the current. So let's just say kind of in pseudocode, this is not actual Python, but in pseudocode, we have the min equals 0. We could say the max equals, and we could just create, or we could say none. And then as we're iterating through each time, we could say, okay, the minimum, and to set it to the first element, or you could set the min and the max both to the first element, and then we're just going to have to start comparing, and you're going to have two different operations. You're going to have to look for each element. Is this one less than, or is this one greater than the current min and the current max? Does that make sense? So you definitely could iterate through them once, do a comparison on the min and the max, and come out the other side and have your minimum and the max. Does that make sense to everybody? Somebody has a question about what I'm talking about, how we're thinking through this. Makes sense. Okay. Yeah. You're just sorting through, looking at each number, and you're just saying, is this one less than the min? Is this one greater than the max? If it is, replace it. If not, move on. So, and remember, this is how we define a function in Python. So we're going to say, we're going to take in the ints. Remember, this is just simply the name, just like JavaScript. This is simply the name of the argument, so we can put numbers in here. When we invoke it, we're simply referring down into the function as ints. I just saw something I did, make sure you don't do. If you do this, leave a space, white space, and then hit enter, you will throw an error in Python. So make sure you don't have useless white space. And we could say we're going to need to find the smallest, remembering we don't need to declare var or let, and we need to find the largest. And this is kind of a first pass solution for Python. We don't need to get into the efficiency of it, but first thing I'm going to think about in any kind of language is, what do we have available in any language or most languages that under the hood for us? What do we have available in languages? Looking for one word, starts with an M.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't understand.
In any language, JavaScript, Python, we've got a lot of stuff built-in under the hood for us. So what is something we could consider here, so we don't have to sit there and do all this typing and the methods, exactly. Methods. .min is a good thing. You don't actually have a dot in there because we're not using JavaScript. So something in this case, we're dealing with a new language we don't really know. So maybe, I don't even know what's going to come here, but maybe I just go in and I Google Python find minimum value method. I bet you anything, Python min comes up very first. Tutorials point. I don't know what this program is, but yeah, I mean, so we can just click on one of these. The min method returns the smallest element in an interval or smallest of 2 or more parameters. So cool, we now found that we've got a method. Even if you don't know the method, just like in JavaScript, start Googling and see if you've got a method you may be able to use. The method might not be the most efficient way to use it, but don't worry about it at this point. It's a quick, clean way that we can do it. Let's check it down here. So min, okay, let's go back. So we could simply say smallest equals min. Hence.
But we don't know the under the hood how the min or max function works. Maybe it takes so much time, or
I don't know what it does. We could look it up in the documentation, and sometimes that doesn't even explain. Yeah, I'm not saying that this is the most efficient way to do it, but I'm saying programmatically, if the method's available to you, a lot of the times you're going to want to use the method instead of trying to roll your own, or like I said, having to write out the iteration. We could easily, do this for, smallest equals, and then we set it to, none, and largest equals to none, and then we could go down and say.
Definitely the for loop going to be the efficient, because we are going to use just one for loop for both of them. But if we are going to use min and max, I think it under the hood it does the same thing, but it's going to do it twice. So we can just for loop through and say if it is smaller than the smallest, then equal than it.
Actually, what I want to do here is say then you could say if num is less than smallest smallest equals num, and then you could also say if num greater largest equals num. Is this what you're saying? Like what you're suggesting we could do?
Yeah, I would go this way. I don't know how the min and max. I'm thinking it's going to be the same for sorting. Maybe under the hood it does the same thing, but we will use it twice, and it would take much time.
I think this will run. I haven't tried this. I just kind of wrote this on the fly, but we can say, okay, so we have our numbers, we have centered. Exactly. That's the thing. And what I'm kind of getting at, this would be fine for a first pass solution. I've got a different first pass solution that's a heck of a lot prettier, and I'm about to show it, but because we've got the time and we've got the conversation going and it's a new language and it's good to talk about the syntax and the indentation and just using the language, I'm going through this. So I'm going to look at this real quick before I run it to make sure. So we set them both equal to numbers 0 for num and int. So we're going, not, yeah, so we're, I didn't do this right. So for num and ints define, we're going to put, and then we would just say invoke it. Like that.
Maybe you need to use ints instead of numbers on the line 4 and 5.
Correct. Yeah, like I said, I wrote this on the fly, so that's correct. That correct. Num and ends, num with some smallest, num, print smallest, print large, centered average number. So this is just going to theoretically print the smallest and the largest. So it should print 1, it should print 50. See if it lets me do this, and I'll just hit last because it's going to go through 33 different steps, and that does work, 1 and 50. So cool. And then, like you said, we'll just kind of, I'm going to back up right here, and I'm just going to change all of this. And something we can do really easy is if we found a function named min, what do we probably also have available to us?
Max.
Yeah. And mind you that this does not, if you've got multiples, it doesn't affect it at all. It's simply going to tell you what the minimum and what the maximum in here is. You can go read the documentation about this. It's been a while since I've looked at the documentation. You can use floats. You can even use strings. I forget how they evaluate strings. I believe it's with the Unicode, but I'm not sure. But that's something you can go look at later. But there's quite a few different things that you can do with min and max, but I forget, again, because strings always get odd when we compare strings, but that's something for another day or another time. This will get you the smallest and the largest the same, just doing this. Smallest equals min ints, largest equals max ints. And, you know, a lot of times when you have these methods, they've been fairly idealized for efficiency within the programs. So this is a lot more readable. It's, you know, if I'm looking at this, I can glance at this real quick. Even if I don't know Python, it's pretty intuitive. Min ints, that's probably going to give me the minimum, and this makes sense. Max ints. Other ways, perfectly fine. Under the hood, it may be doing just as much or more correct, but there's definitely a lot of different ways to skin a cat, as they used to say, but this is the code I had to go with. So either which way, now that we have found the smallest and the largest, we talked about how we were going to go about doing this. So we've got the smallest and the largest. What are we going to do now? You just kind of talk it out, pseudocode it. We don't have to talk about syntax or anything Pythonic, but what could we possibly What do we need to do now? We know the min and the max. What could we do? There's a million different ways to do this. Just start talking through some ways. Remove the min and the max. So yeah, we could literally take the list and remove the minimum and the maximum. What would be the one problem with doing that? What we've already done. So we know the number, but we didn't. What would be the problem with removing the min and the max from the list itself?
I think it will take lots of memory. You need to shift memory when you remove the items.
No, yeah, but I'm thinking the other problem we've got here is we know the minimum value. We've saved the minimum value here of 1, and we've saved the largest value here at 50. The hash is the way to write comments in Python. I'm sure you've already seen that, gone over it, but same as JavaScript and the forward slashes, but here you can use the hash. We didn't say, we don't know where in the list these are, right? So 1, we don't know the index. We didn't save the index with this. We could have enumerated it, but with the min and the max, that does not save the index itself. You could use a loop and use a method called enumerate, where it does kind of like in the for each in JavaScript, where you have the parameters where you both have the value itself and the index. But here we didn't save that, so that's not going to be an easy way. We could iterate back through and look for that number and remove it. But again, that's going to take a lot of, what would be another way we could?
We could add all of them and then subtract the minimum and maximum.
Yep, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. Oh, no. Let me get you. So we need to get a sum, obviously, for an average. So we will set the sum equal to 0. Then what? What are we going to do? If we need to get a sum here, what would we do?
I don't know if there's a method. If there isn't, we need to look through and then.
Yeah, I think there is some sort of a method maybe in Python that I think might sum it all. I don't recall it, but yeah, we can just iterate through it. So for I and ints, and remember, I is just a placeholder. We can name this whatever the heck we want. We could name this cats or whatever. We'll say for I and ints, remember your semicolon or your colon, excuse me. And then what are we going to do?
Sum plus equal e.
That looks good to me. Now remember, we don't have brackets or braces or anything like that. We just have at the header, we've got the colon. We've got our loop. To come out of that loop, we just go back to this space in the indentation. So we've run through this entire loop, and we have a sum of everything. And then you said at the end, what we could do is we could, is this what you were, maybe say sum equals sum minus smallest minus largest? Yeah?
Yeah.
And then what do we need to do from there?
Sum divide length numbers equal to.
So sum, we'll say return. We're going to return here. We're going to return the sum. You said divided?
Yeah, divide length of the numbers.
Length of numbers. Well, we're inside, so we'll say length ints because we're inside the function.
And minus 2.
Yeah. Minus 2. And that's all we're looking for, and this should run. Let's see. Why did I only get 2 steps? Oh, because Oh, no shit. Obviously, I need to invoke centered average one with numbers here. And it should print that centered average, which what should we have? We're going to have 41 plus 34, 75, 85, 95, 104, 106, 156, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 156 divided by 5.
It should be 38.5.
What's that?
38.5.
Yeah, and I've actually got this floor in here, so it should just be 30.
No.
Yeah, somebody can throw it through a calculator. It's going to be, I think it's 156 divided by 5, so that should be like 31, I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
Yeah, 31 we got because it floored it. I had no idea. I had some code written out, but like I said, a lot of these, we can kind of do them as we want. I'm free to present it as I want. I like this kind of participation. Yeah, 31.2. So if you went here, and you said edit this code, and you did a single / and you said visualize execution, and you said last, you get 31.2 exactly. And like I said, you can do this and literally step through every step that's going on here. I think it was JS-Perf that lets you do this in JavaScript. I didn't remember because I didn't use it a lot, but you see each time what's happening, and it shows you the largest, the smallest, the sum, the I. It's giving you all your variables. It's showing you your list, where you're at in the list, what's going on. Pretty cool little program.
That's great.
Okay, so we have come up with a first pass solution. Now, I'm just going to kind of, this goes way beyond basic syntax, but I'm just going to kind of walk through it and then we can talk it out. So for the next, I'm going to say import the statistics package. And this would be like a second pass solution where we're going to make it really quick and really readable. Again, this might not be the most efficient in terms of times, in terms of number of operations, in terms of memory used, but we'll talk more about that later. But something that's just super readable and super quick. You could say import statistics, and we're going to define a centered average of ints. And before I forget, I'm going to invoke it here so I don't forget to do that like I did last time. We'll call this centered average 2, and we will also invoke that with numbers. And I'll actually just comment this out so we only have one to deal with. And and you can go in, and in the documentation, you can see all the different things that are available in the statistics itself. And then we can say ints dot sort. This will sort it all. Return sort is built in. You don't have to import statistics for that. For here, we've imported statistics, and we will say return statistics.mean. And this is what I was thinking of, and I hadn't even seen this yet, that there is something available that will get an average of an iterable without you having to go through and loop through it. But under the hood, it's doing the exact same thing. I am 99.99999% sure. So in terms of efficiency, but in terms of lines of code and readability, so we'll say return statistics.mean. What's the one problem here if we're using this method? What's the problem that's going to happen?
We didn't exclude the...
Well, we've sorted it. So we've sorted it. So now we have to say that we've done this, but we've got this all in order. So we've got the minimums, the first index, and the maximums, the last index. But yeah, what's the problem here that we're going to say return statistics mean of ints in this case?
It will include the min and max also.
Yeah. How might we get around that with some Python syntax? Anybody know? There's a if you Google Python slice syntax, I believe. I think that's what you could look up. I mean, I don't remember exactly. I think it's Python slice syntax. Yeah. No, this is close, but I'm thinking something else. I don't remember the name of the syntax itself. This is more like a JavaScript slice. Ah, right here. And this is doing it with a string, but you can do the same thing with a list. But there's a different name for it. But what you can do, I'll just go back to the code, is you can say, here, put a bracket, put 1, put -1. And what this is telling it to do is start at the first index and end at the index before the final. If you put -2 in here, it would exclude the last 2 of the list. If you put -4 and so forth, if you started here with 0, that means start at the 0 index. But we can start at the first index, that excludes the 1. And then if this were sorted to exclude the 50, the last index, you simply say -1. And if we visualize the execution here, and this is a perfect example of where Python tutor doesn't always work. It's not founder supported. So I'm going to take all this real quick. It'll be a good review anyways. I'm going to copy this, go into my editor. Ah, I just saw this over here. Yeah, that's another thing you could do is pop. You could use the methods in Python to take off the first and the last. That didn't even come to my mind. I like that. So the same as in JavaScript, we have shift, unshift, push, and pop to be able to manipulate the front and the back of a list. We also have similar syntax in Python as well. So if you didn't know those, you could simply do what we were talking about earlier. But we're going to keep going with the way that we had. And I paste this in. Let me see where I am here. Can you copy the code to Slack? Sure. So here, need to import statistics. Just making sure I've got all this. And then we could go down here in the command line, see where we're at. This is in my desktop, so python2.py, so we can say python3 python2.py, and we should get the average printed out. We didn't print though. And this is not going to, we can say z equals save this, run this again, and there we get our answer right here. Everybody know how to run something in the terminal like I just did. I'm going to even make this an anonymous poll because I want to make sure.
John, do you know what's the main difference, Python 2 or 3? If the Python 3 is the latest, why they are still keeping Python 2?
You mean why, if Python 3.6 is the latest, why are they still allowing people to write in Python 2?
Yeah.
Legacy code? I do not know a textbook or an actual answer. I am almost certainly guessing legacy code. Just like, for example, Fortran, the new, go off on a big tangent in a language that's very rarely used, only in certain niche environments, but Fortran has the latest iteration, came out either in the late 90s, early 2000s, much more different than the Fortran that our dads or maybe grandpas used. I know my dad used Fortran back in 1970s when he was in college as an engineering student. But the majority of Fortran that exists is written, I think, in Fortran 77, if I'm not, I might be wrong on the number, but I believe there's a Fortran 77. So, and there's a lot of differences between Fortran 77 and the current iteration of Fortran, but because so much legacy code exists in it, obviously there's still there's going to be support for that. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
So usually, so every time Swift has a new version, they don't like to name it like Swift 3 or 4 and keep everything. You just use it like a Swift. I don't understand why we have Python 2 or 3.
I don't know. That would maybe be a question to ask in the Q&A, something to Google. I really don't know the answer to that. I've never dealt in Python 2. I think when we started, it was like Python 3.4 or 3. It's Python 3.5 when I first did it, because I remember having to update for here. Make this anonymous, but I want everybody to answer this. Does everyone understand what I did in the command line to run this? Cool. Just making sure, because, and you know, another way you could do this, you could literally take all of this, I think, without violating something, you could take all of this, you could invoke the shell. Ah, damn it. Sorry. You could.
I think if you right click, or if you are using Mac, double click.
It doesn't like this import. What were you trying to say?
So if you go to editor and double click or right click and then choose the run.
Oh yeah, you can. Like
run,
this, you mean?
No, run Python in terminal.
Yeah, right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, and you get your 31.2. It did run it. And, yep. So that's another way you can do it. You can play around in the terminal, and here in VS Code, you can just run it in the terminal. You can do it manually down here in the terminal. You can go to via like something like Python Tutor and step through it. You can, even in the terminal, you could say, see if I can do this right. You could say something like define simple, and it's going to take in a num. Num c equals num times 2 and then print c. You can do that c equals num times 2, print c, and then you can hit enter twice and get back to the terminal, and then you could say simple 3 and it should print 6. Yeah, you can do that as well and just do it. Why you would do that, I don't know, but you know, you can do that and paste into there. You can do like you said and run the whole file, and just from here you can run the file in the terminal like I did. Just say Python 3 space and then the file name. Just make sure you're in that directory, or that, I don't know. I tend to do a lot of stuff in the command line without using stuff like this, because that way, no matter what I'm dealing with, I can open it, even if I'm in a different editor and I don't know in that editor how to do it, or the extension isn't working or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. I just want to make sure everybody's clear that there are a lot of ways to do it and to showcase a lot of the different ways. Anybody have any questions over what we just did? Any of the syntax, any of the, so, you know, we kind of made a plan and at the same time executed the plan. And a good example here of reiterating, this is the first pass solution, and then we go back through and say, what can we improve? And we used some fancy things here that allowed us to write this in a few lines as opposed to all the lines that we used here. And of course, there's a lot of other things, the debugging, making sure we're not repeating ourselves, making sure it's operationally, the time complexity and the space complexity is efficient, but we'll go over that more later. Anybody have any questions? Anybody? I guess kind of the last thing I wanted to go over while we're here is kind of some of the goals of computer science. And this, I mean, these are just some real general goals, but you know, they're probably going to become more clear, and they are important when it comes to when it comes to problem solving, when it comes to approaching a problem, when it comes to solving a problem, when it comes to the job. Can everybody hear me okay? Somebody type in the channel. Cool, yeah. I just saw a weird error on my screen, but some of the goals of computer science, just in general, that I'm going to go over real quick, and you need to get used to reading other people's code. End of story, you've got to get used to reading other people's code, and that's going to be one of the things that's emphasized here that is important in industry, especially because you need to get used to modifying and interfacing with code that you didn't write. hopefully they wrote the code clean and clear. Hopefully it's maybe in a language that's really, really user friendly and readable like Python. Hopefully they commented it well so you can understand what's going on, because we all know that we can go back and look at our own code a week or 4 weeks or 4 months later and wonder, what the heck did I do? But end of the day, most of the time in industry, you're going to be dealing with pre-existing code to some degree that you did not write, that might not be ideal. It may be absolute rubbish. So you've got to get used to reading it, modifying it, and interfacing with it. And a lot of the time on the job, you're going to be fixing things, adding new features to something that's already been built. And that goes right back to understanding the problem that, say we have a code base of 30,000 lines of code or 300,000 lines of code or 3,000 lines of code or 300 lines of code, and we've got to add something or fix something in that code. You're going to have to understand what's going on with that code in addition to understanding the problem. So being able to understand other people's code, being able to think outside the box, being able to come up with multiple ways of solving something within the parameters that you've been given, like we did today, is going to be very important. So try to keep that in mind. And the person that wrote the code might not be at the company. They might not be available for communication. So you might not be able to ask them specific questions about what they did. So get used to dealing with that. And the best way that you can do that is just practice reading other code, practice going through specs, doing the code reviews and the whiteboarding that we do, and getting used to, interacting with other people and their code. I don't really have too much else for today. There's about 10 minutes left before the lunch hour. So anybody have any final questions? You've got your repo that you're continuing work on in today. Same as yesterday. Use the 20-minute rule. Use the help channels. Use your PMs. Commit and push up often. For my people, there will be a stand-up at 4:15 Lambda time, regular time. I'll check in with everybody during the day. Anybody have anything? If not, I'm going to turn you loose.
I have a question. So when you say whiteboarding, is that something that we're doing in class, or is that an exercise we will be doing outside of class?
Okay, so unless it's changed, and we all know things can change, Monday through Thursday, when we have the GPs and the lunch hour and, the regular schedule, the first hour of class, 8 to 9, on Mondays and Wednesdays, will be dedicated to watching videos. So these pre-class videos, I am going to start posting with these pre-class videos are generally available in the training kit. If you don't have access to your training kit, get with your PM and they can get you your login credentials for the training kit. But this is all in the training kit. The training kit isn't always the most up-to-date, but that's constantly being improved on. But I generally, on the Friday or the weekend or at some point, will post the pre-class videos for the first 2 days, Monday, Tuesday, and then on Tuesday afternoon, I will post the pre-class videos for Wednesday, Thursday. So on Monday, Wednesday from 8 to 9, you've got time to watch videos, but a lot of time you're not going to have a lot of time to rewatch them, to pause them, to think about it. So I encourage you to watch them early and stay ahead. On Tuesday, Thursdays, most weeks, you will be doing whiteboarding, which you will be paired off with someone. You will each have a problem, and you will be presenting your problem to the other person. It's meant to somewhat simulate whiteboarding in interviews. It's getting used to reading other people's code, interacting with your colleagues, and there will be more details on that later. I've never been real intimately involved in the whiteboarding. They are making some changes to it where it's going to be within the PM group, but once again, I'm not sure the details. But when I refer to whiteboarding officially, within the context of Lambda, I'm referring to the Tuesday, Thursday, 8 to 9 activity that will be occurring in the near future. See somebody's typing. So. How do we know when to use those packages such as statistics? You know, once again, and I don't know what's even going to come up, but if I just went through and said, and there's another, you know, I forgot about that you can just use sum on a list, but right here, Python statistics, mean function. I mean, there's no, yeah, for when I'll get to your question in just a second, it's, there's no clear cut way of knowing. And I think the answer you're generally going to get is just Google, and just know how to Google and just look, and normally something will come up, and you can kind of go from there on whether you're going to use it. But obviously you're not. And as you use the language more, you're going to remember a lot of the methods available. You know, it's talking about the statistics module. So anytime it talks about a module, you're going to need to import that module. And then you could go, say you find this, but this is in Geeks for Geeks, and maybe we don't want to trust that. Maybe we do, but you could go in and say statistics module, Python, mean, and you're going to pull up, I'm sure, the documentation right here first up, and it's going to give you everything you might want to need to know about that specific. Is this our afternoon project, Intro Python 2? That should be for tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. So today, you've got finishing the part 1, the first repo, and then the second repo will be Wednesday, Thursday. If anyone knows otherwise, speak up. I'm going to double check on that, but I am 99.99% sure this is Wednesday, Thursday. But if you're already done with part 1, get going on part 2. Get ahead, please.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know, actually. I thought that the exercises yesterday were supposed to be all done, but yeah, I could use some extra time on those.
Better to be ahead than be behind. In general, how computer science is going to work is you're going to get 2 repos. One repo will cover Monday, Tuesday. The other repo will cover Wednesday, Thursday. There will be times when a repo covers the entire week. I don't recall from the last iteration, but things always change. I don't recall any single day repos, but the general way that we've been handling it in computer science is 2 repos, the first, the second, day 1, 2, day 3, 4, then the sprint. There's one repo that's the whole week and has the sprint in it later on. So definitely good to double check on that, and I am going to double check on that, and I apologize for not knowing the answer right off the top of my head, but that is what I'm almost certain of as far as the assignment goes. And I'm sorry if that wasn't made clear the other day. You know, if Sean forgot to mention it, Sean got jostled at the last moment to take over for me after I had my issues. So I'll find that and I'll post it in this sprint. But is anybody else have any questions? If not, you can hop out of here, go to lunch, take a break.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, John.
Yeah, hold on 1 second so I don't forget this. What's up?
Yeah, sorry, I actually.
Let me